Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. I love having repeat guests, the ones that have made tremendous impact. And my next guest has been on the podcast before. We will link the previous episode in the show notes if you want to go back and listen to that episode, because she was really helpful to a lot of people. If you're walking through any kind of grief, whether you've lost a loved one of any kind, you've changed jobs, you're going through a divorce, any kind of a loss at all, you're moving, this is an important conversation to have. We need more conversations on grief. And my guest just wrote a new book, Gina Moffa, and I want to introduce you to her because my conversation with her holds a tender and dear place to my heart because I just love her so much. Gina Moffa is a licensed psychotherapist in a private practice in New York City. A therapist for nearly 2 decades, she has helped people seeking treatment for trauma and grief, as well as challenging life experiences and transitions, as even positive experiences can bring grief. This includes work with Holocaust survivors, as well as being a clinical director for an outpatient hospital program specializing in substance use disorder. She received her master's degree in social work with a specialty in trauma from the New York University, and most recently wrote a book on navigating loss in a fast-paced society called Moving On Doesn't Mean Letting Go, a modern guide to navigating loss. And what I want to say is Gina is the most humble, down-to-earth, compassionate, and loving person that you might meet. Truly. So who you hear come through is actually who she is in real life. And Gina and I met through a writing group, Rochelle Fredson's writing group, and we just clicked. And so I'm so excited to see her book come out into the world, available in all places. So grab it, write a review that always helps authors, and let me know how this episode has helped you. If you or a loved one is navigating any kind of a grief, loss, transition, trauma, this will be a very helpful episode, I hope. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Gina Moffa. Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I have a repeat guest coming on today because she has her book out in the world and everyone needs to grab it. I have Gina Moffa here, my dear, dear friend, who is joining me, and Pub Day, when this airs, will already have been, but is tomorrow. And I'm so happy for you on Moving On Doesn't Mean Letting Go, and a survival guide to kind of grief. And yeah. I love it because I was in the very infancy stages with you of you writing the book, and here you are, and it's out in the world. How are you feeling about it?
We were just talking about it, and it feels so surreal to me. Talk about the infancy stages. I don't think people know how long it takes to write a book. And we're talking years from the idea that you have in its little seedling, and then following, if you do traditional pub, it's like 18 months in the making. But you have a very short period of time to write the book. So it's funny because I really finished the book well over a year ago, but it takes all of that time now to get through the publishing process itself. And I just recently revisited my book recording the audio version, and I was like, wow, I forgot I had that in there. Oh, thank God I touched upon that. Or wow, why did I say that? Why did I share that embarrassing quip about myself or something? But it's so surreal. It will be out in the world tomorrow. It's almost like suspended animation. I don't know how to feel yet. I'm scared. I'm nervous. I'm excited. I'm humbled. I'm grateful. There's so much there. It feels like such a deep blessing to have the opportunity to have written a book that I really, truly, truly hope helps someone out there. So yeah, all of that to say, it's nutty.
I'm so happy for you because grief is something that we don't talk about much, and people feel like they're hurried through the grief journey, and they're like, well, it's been so much time and I thought you would be moved on by now. And what we know is there's no timeline for grief. How was it writing the book? Because you've had your own grief journey.
Yeah.
Did you have to revisit was there grief bursts throughout it? Was there grief moments? Can you share a little bit about that process?
Absolutely. I was reliving the day my mother died in chapter 1. And throughout the book, a lot of it is kind of how grief evolves to how milestones and anniversaries come up, but also just those mundane, ordinary moments in grief that you can just be walking down the street or getting in your car and you get a whiff of something, or someone you see on the street reminds you of your person. And all of this emotion comes flooding back and physical sensation. And I definitely had moments where I wanted to be as honest as I could about my relationship with my mother. I miss her ferociously. And we also had moments of being really different. And how do you contend with those moments where you're like, I can't just look at this person through rose-colored glasses. When I think in early grief, we want to just put them all on a pedestal and revere them in a lot of ways we can, we should, it's personal. But I also wanted to look at it as an honest human and say, yeah, there were moments my mom and I were so different, she would think I was weird for something, or like we just didn't see eye to eye. And I really relived that in writing the book, but also in a way healing that too, of really seeing where she was always coming from a place of love and caring and worry. And here I was, this adventurous spirit, just wanting to get out into the world and live the full breadth and width of my life, and not wanting my mom to be afraid for me, but not understanding that sometimes that's the role of the mom. So it was an interesting moment of really almost our relationship evolving throughout the course of this book. But I also had a death of a client in the midst of writing this book also, very, very suddenly, lost to a very sudden health condition. And so that really also threw me for a loop. So it was a lot of different types of grieving whilst writing this. And it definitely adds a few layers in there, even for me. But it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's so hard. I'm so sorry to lose a client or in the middle of writing this book.
Yeah. A young, healthy
Unexpectedly.
client. Yeah.
That's really hard.
Yeah.
That's the thing about grief. Sometimes it hits out of nowhere. And you're going along with your day, and then all of a sudden, the person you just talked to 5 minutes ago or saw last week is no longer here. And that's such a hard part, I think, of the grieving journey, the shock and trying to process that sudden loss.
I think we don't understand it enough that our brains actually can't wrap themselves around the fact that this person is no longer where they always are. And yet, so we have to now sort of disconnect from knowing that they're in this place where they always are, but stay connected to them emotionally and in our heart space. So it's really a hard thing for the brain to do. It's a lot of work to grieve, right? I always say grief takes endurance, because the very, very beginning stages of grief, we're both disconnecting and reconnecting at the same time. We have to disconnect from knowing that they're here without understanding really where they are. But we also have to connect and continue our bond and continue our relationship. And that's a strategy, right? That's a hard thing for the brain to do. And it does it, but it does take some time.
Yeah. And what I've noticed about my own grieving journey, because as you know, I lost my mom in October, in working with clients and our team, 5 people on the Pathways to Healing team have lost their parents in the last, 5.
Yeah. Wow.
It's been a lot. And what I've noticed is the amount of energy it zaps and the physical impact of grief that we do not talk about. Can you share a little bit about how it manifests, perhaps for some physically, and then the energy and exhaustion that can come from grief and lack of clear focus, brain fog and all of those things?
I wrote my book with the aim of having somebody read it who does have brain fog, because I didn't want to create a dense book, because it is important that we be able to metabolize ideas and insights in a way that our brain can actually tolerate. But one of the things even I didn't understand as a griever early on, and I was doing this work, was how it was going to show up in my body. I have an entire chapter dedicated to this, because it's so important that we understand that grief is a full body experience, and that it is not just emotions that come and go and ease and all of that it shows up in inflammation in our bodies. People can have higher blood pressure, cardiovascular issues. It can show up in headaches all the time, repeated headaches, gastrointestinal issues, if you are somebody who has that sort of propensity towards gastrointestinal challenges, it comes in the ways that we sleep. We may be sleeping more, we may not be able to sleep at all because we're ruminating. It comes in the way that we nourish our bodies. Are we drinking enough water? I remember getting, even later on, a kidney stone after the death of my mom. I wasn't drinking enough water and I was really dehydrated. And so it's something even like this. Oh, this is grief related. I have dehydrated myself into a painful kidney stone. But it's in our libidos. It is in pretty much every area of our physical ways of moving in the world. Grief will show up. And I'm always saying, and I say this a lot in the book, is that one of the things we really need to do is, especially early on in grief, is not necessarily ignore our emotions, but to pay a lot closer attention to our bodies, making sure that we are moving, making sure that we're getting sunshine, making sure that we're getting enough protein and nourishing our bodies, getting enough water, resting our bodies. Even if we can't sleep, it's important to at least lie down and rest your body and to take it back to basics. It is the most important thing in the very early stages of grief because, like I said, it takes endurance.
Yeah, it's almost like you're in a survival of like, what's the next thing I have to do? And I had a friend say, I've noticed, and I had to go, okay, don't go into shame. She was like, I noticed because we were talking about how grief has impacted us. We were going back and forth. And she said, I noticed you're a lot more slowed down because I'm like pretty peppy.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't say energetic, but I'm peppy, maybe enthusiastic. And I
sure are.
I think that kind of has maybe tapped down a notch that I wasn't even aware of. And it was like interesting to hear, like, oh, I kind of noticed you're a little bit less energetic is the word she used. And I was like, yeah, that's true. So sometimes how do we become aware of, because sometimes you're just going through the motions. It's almost like, how do we become more aware of what we need during the grieving journey?
I think most of the time, and I speak from experience, I became aware by doing it wrong. And I don't mean that in any way that people are doing it wrong, but for me, I got very sick and wound up in the hospital with pancreatitis and my thyroid stopped functioning as well. And I think I want people to avoid finding out the hard way. So that's one of the things I say is it's really hard to know if you're not giving yourself what you need. And so that's why I say, let's start here. So you don't get to the point where you find yourself losing energy. But the truth is the grief process, if we know what it could be like ahead of time, that these things could happen, you could be more exhausted. You could find yourself anxious more. You could find yourself feeling depressed and ruminating, or the ruminating is the guilt and all of that stuff. But even if you find yourself feeling more tired, it's not something we can necessarily know ahead of time. But I think that we're not taught to be more connected to our bodies. I mean, we understand the mind-body connection, right? It's this buzzword in the wellness trend world. But I don't think we really understand it in terms of how it affects our mental health and how the two are so closely related when anything painful in our life happens or challenging or sudden. And so it's really hard to say, oh, how do I find awareness of the fact that I am maybe lower energy or moving slower? We won't necessarily know it unless someone points it out, or we're just very in tune with our bodies, right? You also have a lot happening in your outer world and people to take care of and people who count on you, and both clients and podcast guests and family. And so in those cases, it's really, we have to say, okay, I'm always giving my energy out. What do I do for myself in this way? Can I schedule time to just check in? Can I put my hand on my heart and say, what do I need right now? How am I doing? Is there anything that I need that I'm not giving myself? And what is this experience that I'm having today in grief? And I think we don't do that enough. Maybe we feel like it's silly, or maybe we don't actually have the time or take the time, or we're not maybe used to it. But it is important to check in with ourselves as often as possible during grief, because we are ever shifting and our bodies will be speaking. It's just a matter of if we're listening and how we're listening.
Okay, so how did you know that it was grief related after you got pancreatitis and the thyroid? How did you connect that it was grief? And then how did you work through it?
Well, I feel like, okay, I shouldn't say that grief itself manifested it, but I do believe that it certainly exacerbated it. For the first time, I actually stopped. I was so busy after my mom died because I had a few other major losses the same week. My job ended and my building got sold of where I was working and as a clinical director, and my apartment building got sold. And the restaurant that I go to for refuge for 10 plus years suddenly got sold or lost its lease, something like that. Something happened where it just all within the span of a week, I lost many, many foundational things in my life. And so I didn't feel like I had the time. I didn't have the time to really sit in my feelings and explore the loss of my mom because I had a lot of other losses to contend with. And so when I started to feel my body shutting down, once you're in a hospital bed and you're like, now what? You have the time to really feel what you need to feel. It was really a hard moment, I'll be honest. But I went back to my doctor and I said, what's going on? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, you've always been healthy. What's really happening here? And I looked at him and I said, and I don't know why I asked it. I said, do you think it could be grief? And he asked me, when did your mom die? I said, a few months ago, a few weeks ago, several weeks anyway. And he said, no, you're good. That was a while ago. That wouldn't be affecting you now. And that's when it dawned on me. Number one, the medical field is ill-equipped to deal with grief. And at least at the time, this is several years ago now, 7 years ago. But I thought to myself, wow, I think actually I'm onto something here. I think that my body is really manifesting the severe emotion that I'm not able to feel right now. But also, to me, it felt really traumatic because everything that was safe just was crumbling beneath me. And at the time, I didn't have a poetic point of view about it. I was like, what the hell? Like, really, God? Like, is this what I'm doing right now? And so I really do believe at that particular time, I was just in such a state of upheaval that my body was not sure what to do with it and that it manifested in these different ways. And it did dawn on me after I talked to my doctor and my doctor sort of brushing it away and my saying, actually, no, you shouldn't be brushing this away. This is really important. And by the way, this isn't weeks after losing a parent, is not long ago, and nobody should just be fine by now. And in fact, it's when things start to really bubble up.
Absolutely. I can see how you're like, no. I'm on to something here. So, okay, this leads to another question. A friend and I were talking, and of course, this is my whole theme. A friend and I were talking.
I know.
And
I love it.
I don't even know what it would look like to grieve, fully grieve. What would it look like if someone's fully grieving? Because we have lives, we're trying to keep jobs, we've got families. What would it look like if we're fully grieving? She's like, I don't even know.
I mean, I think it would be really fully showing up to the experience in every present moment. I don't want to say that people aren't fully grieving if they have to go to work or they're not fully grieving if they have to parent. I think grief shows up however it needs to show up for us. And I don't think grief shows up in the tears or the wailing on the floor like it does for one other person. I think we all have a different way of releasing our emotions. But I would say, what are the ways in which you cope with things that are hard? What are the ways in which you experience your emotions after something really, really significantly painful happens in your life? Because that's how we show up fully for it. It's going to look different for everybody. I know somebody who went on a nature retreat after a major loss and spent 7 days wailing in a forest. And that's a very high bar. Tell me many people who can do that. I am so envious that somebody could take 7 days to be in the forest to wail. And I don't say that in any snarky way. That's amazing. I don't have that luxury. And I didn't have the luxury at the time. And I think a lot of people don't have the luxury. So how do we show up for our grief in the ways that we can? Does that mean if we can't go wailing in a forest that we're not showing up fully? No, it doesn't. What it really means to show up fully is to not push it away and not actively continue to push it away, right? We have days where we're in the grocery store and we may not want to break down every time. It's okay if we do, but we may not want to. So maybe we put it in a little box and we keep it in the side until we're out at the car and then we can let it loose. But I think it's really important to know that showing up fully is simply showing up in a way that is not pushing it away. So I almost say it's the opposite. We show up, we grieve fully by not denying our grief, by engaging with it when it's here, by taking care of our bodies, by understanding that grief will play a role in every area of our lives and doing whatever we can to show up to that with honesty and as much self-compassion as we possibly can. So, I mean, that is my version of showing up fully.
That's so true. And I think there's something else to be said in the grieving journey, like your relationship with the person that, well, whoever it is, it changes in a way, and that might scare some people, but I think it evolves, it changes, it transcends.
Yeah.
Talk about a little bit about that. During the grief process, it doesn't stay the same necessarily.
It doesn't. For me, I'm going to speak for myself right now because it's maybe a little easier to conceptualize that. Because look, I'm understanding that there are people who will lose people that they didn't have a great relationship with. And that may be a benefit for them, right? So, but what I do think is important is if you've had a wonderful relationship or a meaningful relationship, the idea that you have to let them go like society wants you to is not realistic and it's not healthy. And I think unless it's something that you want to do, let's not do it. For me, I started to see my mom as this invisible sidekick, and I started to have more and more conversations with her. I started to think of the things in our relationship that I wanted to be better, and I talked it out with her. And I imagined that I got the answers that I wanted. And at the end of the day, I always knew that love was present. And even you're in a relationship and it doesn't feel like love is present, that you can bring that sense of love. And it really is love for self and love for what could have been. But I think it's important to know that even if you didn't have a great relationship, you can change the course of that. If you didn't feel empowered by that relationship, you can take back that power. You can have the conversations that you need to have because now they're safe to have them. And I think what we often look at with grief is that it's just an ending and a cutting off and there's no more chances. And I don't think that that would be healthy to just think that way. I think that we can continue to evolve in our relationships. We can heal things that we weren't able to when they were alive. We can heal things that we were estranged. We can say the things that we need to say. And if you had a loving relationship, to think of ways that honor them in ritual or behavior or in your own life day to day that feel meaningful for you. But by all means, if you want to keep your relationship or you want to fix your relationship or evolve it, this is all possible. It isn't just, oh, that's too late now. I mean, we have to think bigger. We have to think outside of the box.
Where do you find accessing joy and laughter? Because for some people, it could be a defense. For some, they feel guilty that they're having any joy or laughter. And then some find it very therapeutic. So where in the grief journey would you find joy and laughter?
I think I'm probably not alone when I say joy and laughter took me by surprise. So it was really the week that my mother died, and I was at a dinner party that I didn't want to go to, but all the friends were gathering, and we wound up playing Cards Against Humanity, and I couldn't help it. It was as if laughter came and kidnapped me, and I just found myself rolling on the floor with laughter, and to be honest, my body needed that release. And I could have gotten up and said, wow, my mom just died. What am I doing here laughing and having a good time? And that thought definitely crossed my mind for sure. But the other part of me was like, wow, I needed that. Wow, my body needed that. Wow, what a release. And my mom was funny and my mom loved to laugh. It would make her really upset if I just never found joy again. What honoring would that do for her? And what honoring would that do for the rest of my life that she created? And so I find that we have to make room for joy and laughter. We don't force it, but sometimes it will come and take us by surprise. And there's a myth that we always have to be sad and gloomy and grieving. And grieving is not always dark. And grieving is not always sitting in the corner close to the floor. And grieving is not always just crying. Grieving is remembering the beauty that these people brought to our lives, whoever we've lost. Grieving is being present in the fact that this person had so much meaning to us and loved us and cared for us. And grieving is keeping that love alive and spreading that. That's really what grief is also. We hear grief is love all the time, and grief is joy, and grief is laughter, and grief is taking care of ourselves, and grief is continuing traditions. It's not just this one-dimensional thing. And so I don't want anyone to feel guilty if they find that laughter comes by surprise. And it certainly doesn't sever you from missing them or grieving them. It's all in it, all together. That is also grief.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think some people need to hear that and need that permission. And I do think it's a release. I do. Because I'm like, Seinfeld's coming to town. Oh, Jerry Seinfeld. I could love to see him. Like, there's this thing, like laughter is something I'm craving. And it's like, my body's craving that. My body's craving a release. And to look at that way and to honor it, I think is really important. I was wondering for you, does this get heavy talking about grief all the time? Or just for some reason that question popped in my head. I was like, does this get heavy for Gina to talk? I mean, you're swimming in it in a sense.
I am always swimming in it. Absolutely. I've been doing trauma work for 20 years, and grief is a very big part of that. And now I focus primarily on both of them together. But grief, it's so multifaceted, and I laugh a lot in my sessions, and it comes upon us in pretty unexpected ways. And so I think that's what the joy of my work is that it isn't all about the sadness, and it isn't always about how that sadness manifests itself, but it is also about remembering the beauty and remembering the good things and also remaining who we are. I could say grief changes us, and it does in a lot of ways, but the core of who we are, the laughter and the joy, that stuff is so involuntary. It will come out because it's a part of who we are. Yeah, is it during COVID? For sure. I feel like I was inundated, was also volunteering with 2 other organizations and taking on as many people as I could, and starting to write a book on it. And so I for sure was really inundated, and I didn't have any release at that point because I was isolated. And now I could say, okay, I feel like this is getting a little heavy. It's been a hard week. And what am I going to do to fill myself back up? Or how do I get back out there? You know, nature. I watch a lot of panda videos. They're,
I love it.
Sometimes between sessions, if it's really heavy, I will watch a panda falling off of a chair or rolling down a hill. And you really can't help it. It just came upon me, and I will roll of laughter. Or watching a puppy. I go back to basics for me. I'm like, okay, what is it for me personally that I find funny, or things that I need to just have a quick refill? If you have a quick refill or something that makes you laugh, like throw on a YouTube video of Jerry Seinfeld for your 10-minute break and put it on while you're making lunch, or whatever it is that can just give you a quick burst of life again. For me, it's a new thing, by the way, Kristen. I was not always into the panda videos, but now this is a new discovery of Gina. I really like the panda videos, and it's just so funny. I'm assuming I'll grow this at some point, since I am a fully grown adult, but it can get very heavy. So for me, I'm like, how can I fill up really quickly and bring my full self back in here just to get that energy back up? But I'm fortunate. I really love people with whom I'm working. And if I couldn't help them, I would refer them. But it is joy. I mean, I really do get so much from connecting with people in this way. And I know I shouldn't say we love them, but you gotta love them.
Oh, I do love them. I love you to all my clients, because I do. I genuinely love them, and I'm genuinely curious about their story. Like, I want to know, and I know you do too. And that curiosity, I think, is what keeps that joy alive in us to some degree. I feel like that's the gift that keeps on giving, is that I'm really genuinely curious about their process and want to know how they really feel.
And I just feel like it's such an honor to hold space for someone. We're not just in the hard times. Like, I'm looking at somebody's life as a whole, not just their loss. It's how do we fit their loss in this life and go forward from there together. But to me, it's like I'm always finding that I'm rooting for someone. I'm looking at the bird's eye view and saying, okay, up ahead, I see a river. We could take a rest there, something like that. And I think that's the beauty of our job, is that we're able to see a different, higher perspective and help lead people there in some way, or at least when we're in the deep, dark canyon, to have the privilege of being someone's traveling companion in that place. And it really is a calling, because it isn't for the faint of heart being a traveling companion, but there's so much joy in it. There really is. And it's really interesting, because I don't know if you feel this way, but I can't explain why there's joy in it, why it's so life affirming, but I just feel it from my soul that this is where I'm supposed to be. And how grateful am I to be able to play this part with people?
100%. You're saying it so beautifully. It just speaks to my heart and soul. I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. So what, as we kind of wrap up, which I hate to do, what would be the 3 most important things you would want to share about grief?
Oh, I would say this. Don't compare yourself to other grievers. Don't compare your loss to other people's loss. Everyone will have a different experience. And so I want you to adjust your expectations that your loss and the way that you contend with it and endure it will be different from other people. So it's really important that we just wipe out expectations. But with that said, to replace it with self-compassion, thing that we're really hard at. Humans are really hard at self-compassion, but we're always quick to do self-improvement. You know what I mean? How can I do this better? How can I grieve better? How can I grieve more efficiently? And I'm saying we do that by being kind to ourselves, by showing up for ourselves, by giving ourselves the attunement that we need to whatever our needs are, by going gently, by creating rituals that feel good and honor both ourselves, our lives, our histories, and what we've lost and whom we've lost, but also to reach out. We can't do this alone. We're not islands. We cannot isolate when we're in a place of loss. Solitude is great. Isolation can get dangerous. But please reach out, accept help. People always want to help, however clumsily. And so often we say we don't need it when we do. It's just the connection. Accept genuine connection. You don't have to go it alone. Bring in self-compassion. Create some new rituals that feel good and that honor your loss. And do whatever you can to not compare yourself. Grief can be messy. Grief can be long. Grief can be unpredictable and tenuous, and you do not have to go it alone. Just do it gently, one day at a time, and however you can support yourself with comfort and good people who really get it. And that would be really what I would say is a good starting place.
Yeah, I love that. Where can people find the book? What are the important pieces you want people to know about the book? And what's the main takeaway that you want to share today?
Well, first of all, you can find the book anywhere books are sold. A lot of people, it's easier to get Amazon. I love independent bookstores, but anywhere that you feel comfortable or you buy your books, my book should be there. I'm great and I'm grateful for that. And I wrote this book because I wanted something that was a very gentle, caring, and warm voice and heartfelt guide during a time when people are losing and may not know what to do next. And this talks about non-death losses, different types of losses, how loss can be and grief can get more complicated if we didn't have a great relationship, but also for people who don't know how to say no to the wedding that they want to go to, or people that don't know how to go back on dates or how to be in marriage and go through a loss, how to go back to work and figure out how to navigate all of these new life things that now that you are a different person going through this really painful life event, it changes us. And so I wanted that what next and how do I do it sense of agency over something that's really unpredictable. And so that was why I wrote this. But I also wanted it because people don't have access to therapy. Grief is a really big mental health burden that people are carrying. But so many people either are afraid of therapy because they had a bad experience, they can't afford it, or wherever they live, they don't have a good therapist there or a therapist there. And so I wanted this to be sort of a frontline moment for them. Like, this is what it would be like to be in therapy. And I want you to feel as cared for and seen and witnessed and held in the pages of this book as much as a book can do, because we're obviously limited. And this book is not a savior by any means, but my hope is that it could be something that you can return to again and again when you needed help with specific things in your life, and also just to have permission to feel what you feel and learn about yourself. How do you know if what you've experienced is traumatizing? Why does your grief feel different than other people's grief? This stuff is really always present when we're grieving, and not a lot of people understand what they're experiencing. So that's why I wrote this book. And my hope is that it's just a soft landing for people in this confusing state.
Thank you for writing the book. Moving on doesn't mean letting go. I think this is a really powerful book that is digestible. That's right. I liked what you said. Like, when you're in brain fog, you have a hard time digesting or feeling motivated. Try to even work on something or understand something. And this is the solution to that. Like, if you need something, a book that is going to be digestible, that you can have practical application and steps and tools and validation for your process. I think that's what you've really captured. So thank you so much. Everybody grab the book. Yeah, GinaMoffa.com is your website.
Sure is.
So if you want to know more about Gina, hop on our website. I got on there today. It's lovely.
Oh, thank you, friend. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I want this to be a community. I just started a Facebook support group. I'm going to do a book club around my book in the fall. I'm also wanting to do a workshop on how to get through the holidays while grieving. But yeah, I wanted to do a book club also so that we can actually go through the book together and really tackle some of these moments that come up for us in our grief. So please sign up for my newsletter so you don't miss out if that's something that speaks to you. And if you do buy my book, I thank you so much. And just know that I'm in it with you. And the more that we all understand about grief, the better we can do for one another and ourselves. So thank you, Kristen, for having me on this. I love you so much anyway.
I love
Such
you.
a gift. This is such a gift.
If they want to get on the book club or get your mailing list, how do they do that?
You can find it at GinaMoffa.com. Right on my website, there will be something that says get letters from Gina. And also, I don't have the book club information up yet because I'm in the process of creating it. But you can find all that. That will come to you in the newsletter if you sign up for it. So
thank you. Seriously, I want to tell everybody, and I'm just for a moment, you are one of the most compassionate, loving, caring, in tune people I've met. And I've met a lot of people. Yeah, I just wanted to say that about you. And you had a post yesterday, and I was like, of course, this is because this is the energy you're bringing to the world. Gina posted on her Instagram and Facebook that a gal that had been a kind of a beta reader, if you will, Gina was doing a photo shoot. And this gal that was a beta reader had her book as they were doing this photo shoot, reading your book at the exact same time of this photo shoot. I'm like, this is so Gina. I'm like, yes.
It was surreal. I mean, I walked past the bench and I was like, that looks so familiar. And I was like, wait, it's mine. That's why it looks familiar. That's my book. Oh my gosh. It was one of those moments where I was like, hi, I'm so sorry to bother you, but that's mine. And also, hi, and thank you for reading it. And also, can I take a picture with you? Because this is wild. And she was so wonderful and gracious about it. And so I did take a photo of me just in pure shock that this was happening. And I was telling Kristen earlier, for anyone listening, it's like, I was so scared to ask her what she thought of it. I was like, I won't ask you what you think of it. It's totally okay. But I hope that you like it. And it was really sweet. It was a sweet moment, but I had to capture it. So I'm grateful that she let me.
It was so cute. I was like, of course, she loved the book, found it helpful. But here you are on the park bench with the book, and she's holding your book. I thought it's like out of a movie. It's like When Harry Met Sally. I mean, not really, but I was like, this is unbelievable in New York City.
No, I mean, yeah, you should include it because it was really surreal. It was so surreal. And I was thinking, wow, is this what it's going to feel like to see my book in the wild? And yeah, I think as an author, you forget that there may be a time that you see somebody reading your book. And I feel like I'm not really great at self-advertising and self-marketing. I just hope that it helps, right? And so I would be afraid to see my book out in the wild because I want to say, hey, what do you think? Did you find it helpful? And, I hope you found it helpful. And if you didn't, please email me so I can figure out a way to make it more helpful for you. And because that's really all I want. It's probably best I don't see it out in the wild too often because I might get pretty tired.
Oh, I love it. It's going to be out there. It's going to be out there in the wild often. So I just want to say thank you, Gina, for your heart, your authenticity, your vulnerability, and being of service to the world. This is a book that's going to change lives. So go grab it and write a review because that's what helps book authors. Write a review and let us know what you think. So thank you for being here. And I'm so proud of you.
Thank you, friend. And likewise, thank you for all you do. And I know your listeners can completely agree with me and attest to the fact that you are a bright light and a blessing to so many of us. So thank you for doing what you do.
Love you, Gina. This is like a love fest.
It kind of is. We need more of that in the world.
We do. Thanks, Gina. So excited for tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, KRISTEN, Boyce, BOICE.com. Thanks and have a great day.